Okay, so in this video presentation, I'm going to talk about how popular culture has the ability to give and take power away from certain people and societies through ideological influences. The texts that I chose to look at were John Story's What is Popular Culture and Barry Brummett's Rhetoric in Popular Culture. I chose to look at Story's key text because it links ideology with culture and looks at how power relations could be defined. I chose Brummett because it outlines the ways in which one thing can signify another and influence others to simply think of an idea in particular. I thought that together these texts gave some insight into how individuals might manipulate popular culture to, in a sense, manipulate or influence other people. Both texts look at definitions of culture, but approach it in different ways. For example, Story's text looks at culture and ideologies embedded within it, while Brummett starts off by explaining the ways in which something may signify another thing. Then he continues on about how those artifacts in our lives that give meaning and how they create a system that shape culture. In Story's key text, I wanted to focus on the section where he links ideology with culture. In this section, Story points out that ideology and culture do cover much of the same conceptual perspective. However, ideology brings a political dimension to the table. The second definition of ideology that he provides suggests distortion or concealment in culture that works to benefit the powerful. It suggests how texts and practices present distorted images of reality to create a message. It argues that these distortions are made to work in the interest of the powerful against the interest of the powerless. So this is known as capitalist ideology. With this approach, ideology conceals the reality of domination from those in power. So the dominant class don't actually know that they don't actually see themselves as a powerful group of exploiters or oppressors. And more importantly, it conceals the reality of subordination from those who are powerless. So again, the subordinate class don't actually realize that they're being oppressed or exploited. A third definition that it gives relies heavily on the previous definition. In fact, it's actually quite similar. It looks at society as it uses ideology to refer to ideological forms, which draws attention to the way in which texts seem to present a particular image of the world. It looks at society as a conflictual realm rather than a consensual one, which is structured around inequality, exploitation, and oppression. In other words, it argues that all texts are ultimately political, and they give rivaling ideological significations of the way that the world is or should be. A fourth definition argues that ideology operates mainly at the level of connotations, so it's often focused on the unconscious meanings of texts and the unconscious meanings that texts and practices carry, or the way that they can be made to carry them. I found myself in agreement with these three definitions, as I thought they were very accurate and could explain the motivation for many commercials and political ad campaigns. For example, Apple sells their products to make profit and to encourage a more technological and convenient future. It's a widely known fact that Apple products are they tend to be much pricier than their counterparts from other companies, and yet people still purchase iPhones and MacBooks every day. Neither the company nor the consumers quite know who has a seat of power in this relationship, as consumers determine the sales, and the company provides the innovative technology to the public. As the third definition describes, when Apple advertises, it focuses on the benefits of convenience that consumers could have. Their advertisements don't skew the way that the world is, but rather pushes towards a futuristic state that the world hasn't yet achieved. The class struggles in these definitions are suggestive of classical Marxism, which I've found to be a somewhat interesting topic. Marxism suggests that those who have power have the ability to consciously or unconsciously create a popular culture. So what works in favor for them tends to determine what a society consumes, because they decide what goes on shelves, TVs, radios, and what's released to the public. So in Brummett's text, it begins by looking at how everyday objects, actions, and events influence people. We think we might dress a certain way simply because of a personal taste, but we don't consider the fact that those choices have the potential to turn us into different people. it looks at how influence is also a way of securing power, and how power is the ability to control events and meanings. The text it describes how empowerment and disempowerment not occurs not during isolated moments of conspiracy, but during everyday experiences of popular culture. Yeah, the things that we encounter. So the things that we encounter in our everyday experiences influence us, whether we know it or not, even if it's like just the slightest bit. Just as empowerment or disempowerment occurs, so our ideologies won't change so easily, but they occur in small segments of suggestion. So how do everyday things influence us? Brahmet talks of how everything is a sign, and how everything around us has the ability to make us think of something else apart from what the object or event or whatever it actually is. We unconsciously look beyond what we see, so companies know this and take this into consideration when molding what they hope to be a popular culture to be consumed. He looks at three ways of things. Things that acts as signs, which is lexically, iconically, and symbolically. When something has a lexical meaning, it means that the sign and meaning are linked in a way of cause or association. So one thing is often or always found with another, so naturally you tend to think of that one thing when the other is brought up. For example, when you see smoke, you think of fire. When something has an iconic meaning, it means the sign makes you think of another thing because it resembles that one thing. So that sign works as an icon. For example, onomatopoeias are words that resemble sounds, so it makes you think of the sound. Symbolic meanings are a lot less, so symbolic meanings are signs that get you to think of something else purely because of an agreement or a convention. There's no strong or clear necessary connection between the two, between the signifier and signification, so it can be easily altered. For example, the word book, there is no reason that it should signify a book, besides the fact that it's a universal agreement among the English-speaking world, and everyone agrees to its usage, despite the arbitrary relationship between word form and word meaning. I find the extent to which these meanings apply is limited because the signifier's meanings vary widely. Some meanings are less widespread or even private, so it's possible that not everyone will be able to understand what the meaning of that sign is. Brahman looks at a system of artifacts that shape culture, and he defines an artifact to be an action, event, or object perceived as a unified whole, which has widely shared meanings and manifests group identification to us. We see things because of the social context that we're raised in. People around us show us things and certain other things, but not others. So to be defined as an artifact, these things must be charged with a widely shared meaning amongst, say, for example, a generation of people. An artifact will always have a connection with a group, so they represent groups to us. They remind us of those groups and to what we're committed to by our identification with them. Artifacts, they're the material signs of group identification. Whatever artifacts and groups that we identify ourselves with says something about what kind of society we live in and what kind of person we want society to view us as. So the clothes that you wear and the events that you participate in tell other people little things about yourself, thus manipulating their perspective of you. So for example, you might dress in a high fashion to make others think that you're so much wealthier or classier than they are, or they might dress like a typical hip-hop dancer, so others label you as having swag, or either way, you have the power to manipulate other people's thoughts about you. Popular culture is consumed every day by billions of people because they've all been influenced to think that something is important, whether it's beauty, health, or a good taste in music. Dominant groups are aware of this, and they manipulate popular culture through signs and signify their ideologies, thrusting their values onto the subordinate class to maintain their power in society.